Welcome everyone. Thanks for coming along today and for doing this. Look, there was obviously there's a lot of information in that report and a lot to digest. I mean, in terms of first impressions, I wanted to ask each of you really, just to say briefly, was there anything you found particularly surprising? What was most surprising in that report, if anything? And John, if I start with you.
Well, firstly, I think it's a really interesting and useful piece of research, so thank you. The most interesting, probably, the most surprising is probably the amount of time that people spend listening to podcasts. The fact that 11% of commercial audio are listening through podcasts might be a surprise to a number of people in the room, given the amount of noise and heat there is around podcasts in our industry. Which is not to be podcast down, right? I think that they're really useful, valuable to us and our clients, particularly around kind of topics of interest and particular kind of communities. But it's important to keep it in the right proportion.
Yeah, I think that's helpful. And Kate, coming to you.
I could say that the report, there was lots of things in there that you felt like you already knew, and it's always nice to have some research that kind of put
validate
some figures.
Yeah,
thank you, that's the word I'm looking for, that validates that. But for me, it was a really good reminder. You didn't share these figures in some of the slides you showed. The strength of commercial audio for younger people. So I think it shows that the 15 to 24s and 25 to 34s listen to more commercial audio than older audiences. And I think if you spoke to my planning team, when they're talking about how to reach those hard-to-reach audiences, I don't think commercial audio would be something that would instantly spring to their mind.
Yeah. I mean, we sort of hear that a bit when we do our training with sort of people from agencies as well. Their initial reaction is a little bit, well, surely... Or podcasts, it must be a lot bigger, radio must be a lot smaller, and actually when it's presented with the data against your own personal behaviour, it sometimes, it challenges that. And Gemma, in terms of surprises, from your perspective, was there anything in the report?
I think I agree with John on the podcast thing. I would have expected that to be bigger. But I think one of the things from the report that really stood out, that just kind of to reaffirm to people and to clients, is the amount of time spent listening to audio as a whole. I think sometimes clients and people fall into the trap of people only listen in car. It's just something you put on in the car and that's it. I have a client that's like, oh, but people aren't commuting then. And it's like, people don't just listen to the radio just for in-car listening. So for me, the big takeout to really push the amount of time spent with audio as a whole is a really important takeout. But I think the podcast one, I would have expected it to be much bigger. Yeah,
but I guess as you say, the fact that the overall cake is growing for everyone is also a sort of a headline that might challenge some people's preconceptions.
And how good commercial is versus the BBC.
Yeah, of course. It goes without saying. And Simon, from a sort of media owner perspective, was there any sort of surprises in there?
I don't think there was anything massively surprising, because it's kind of my job to know that stuff. That was good. Yeah. I think it challenges a few stereotypes and preconceived ideas from agencies and clients about how the audio market looks and how it works. I think it's a really excellent piece of work. And I know in the room there's lots of people from Bauer Global and other radio companies. I think the big point for me is how we, as an industry, take this out, talk to clients, spread the word, and just make more clients feel passionately about it. I mean, if all clients were like Arafa this morning, it would probably be much easier, right?
Yes, exactly right. And the report, obviously, it focuses on multi-platform audio, commercial audio in its entirety and together. But I'm also interested, particularly from an agency perspective, how you sort of buy and manage audio these days, and how that's changed sort of over the years, and whether you expect that to change further. I mean, we've had some conversations about this. And Kate, if I just come to you first on that, in terms of, obviously back in the day there were sort of heads of radio to run those divisions, but obviously that's changed a lot over recent years.
Yeah, we historically have always had a head of radio, head of audio. It's not a role that we have at Wavemaker at the moment. We have an AV team who are responsible for all forms of video and all forms of audio, so TV, video on demand, cinema, radio, podcasts. So we now have a broader group of people who, rather than being specialists in video or audio, are specialists across the piece. And we see the benefit of that is we have activation specialists who can talk to our clients about a broader spectrum of channels and have more kind of engaging conversations with clients, but also make decisions based on what's right for the brief they've been given, rather than I've been given a television budget, I should spend this much, my radio budget is over here. Arguably, you could say that potentially there's a potential for that kind of skills of audio planning to be lost, and we have been having discussions recently about should we be having those kind of video and audio specialists. But we're really not kind of finding that that's a problem. Our audio investment has grown pretty similar to what you've showed across the market. Our kind of client audits would suggest that we're still buying audio particularly well, and Jon will like this, we win some awards for our audio work as well. So we think that we've still got that really strong basis in audio, so it's something that we're going to continue with for the
But I guess it doesn't stay still forever. No. It's always sort of under review and checking. And is there a risk there, I guess? I mean, Gemma, you were head of radio at one point. Yeah. Is there a risk that we lose some of that planning specialism as a result of these changes?
Absolutely not.
Not if you're still there. No.
I think there is a risk, but I think if you've got, like we did have I was a head of audio, and then the teams merged. And I think the benefit to having an AV team that focus on every part of kind of broadcast media is that when I was head of audio and it was an audio budget, it would be that you were presenting to clients and time would run away, and then you'd go in and they'd be like, oh, it's radio, you've got 3 minutes. And I think, and it used to happen all the time, and now that doesn't happen because you've got your broadcast budget, so you can divvy up that spend to reach that audience where you think it best fits, to deliver the best results, to come up with the best partnerships. So I think I think it's really important in agencies to have people who are specialists still. So, I am unashamedly an audio geek, as Jon knows. He still ribs me every radio day because it's my favourite day. I know. And I think if you've got that and people can shout about it, then it's really important. So from my perspective in our agency, I won't let the planning expertise of planning audio kind of fall down. Yeah. I'm really passionate about that. We're the planners, we plan it and buy it. The radio groups will know when they're trying to get me to buy day parts that I don't want, and I'm really particular about it. And again, from an audit point of view, we do extremely well on those audio audits. So I think it's, again...
Too well, in my view.
Yeah. That's not a thing.
Yeah, we're planning it and we're buying it incredibly well, and I think that's really important for clients as well.
And is there an opportunity, I guess, for audio as well as being part of this? I mean, Jon, maybe I'll ask you, for being part of a broader AV team, because you may have clients that will come to you and say, well, I want to be on telly, I want to be part of this. But actually, you might say, well, actually, if you... with your budget for what you're trying to achieve, with your objectives, actually have you thought about audio, have you thought about this approach?
Yeah, so I think we're structured slightly differently at PhD in that we do have an audio team that sits within a wider media experience unit. So we think it's important to still have that really deep channel specialism, but the term media experience is kind of deliberately broad, because what we want is the people with those deep channel specialisms to also have license to kind of follow ideas and kind of create cross-channel solutions for clients. So I'll give you a relatively recent example. A client of ours sponsored the transfer deadline day content with TalkSport, and it's primarily an audio piece, but because the team worked with the client and our partners, we're able to extend it across connected TV and across social. So it's for the listener, for the consumer, it's a kind of fully rounded package. So for us, it's about trying to find that balance between deep specialism and being able to give people license to do the right thing for client.
Yeah. And Simon, from your perspective, are there sort of changes that you would like to make or that you are making to sort of make the most of some of these opportunities as well within your teams?
Yeah, so I think what Kate said was really interesting. So obviously for the last 5 years, we've been working with News UK and the joint venture Octave, which was about selling digital audio. I kind of feel that's been really successful for us and for them, but I think we've both come to the point in that, which is why we're launching Audio XI on our own in the UK in 1st of July, is that, to Kate's point, AV teams now have a look at the full brief and think about what is the best way to respond to it. So I want my team out talking to Kate's team about all the aspects that audio can now deliver, because audio's changed so much in the 10 years that I've been in it. When I left The Guardian to go to Absolute 12 years ago, people were saying, why are you going to radio? And there was this perception of it being the box in the corner of the kitchen or in the car, and it's changed now completely. And there's so many different things it can do. I think what we need to do as a team is have those broader conversations with people who are planning media to get the biggest part of that budget into. And, Global should do the same. We should all be fighting to get the more money into radio. Then we can obviously duke it out over the last bits when it.
I think it stands the test of time, doesn't it? I think someone mentioned earlier about, it was going to be the death of radio.
Yeah.
And if I had a quid for every time I've heard that, and I've worked with radio for over 20 years, then I'd be really rich, because everyone's like, with the death of radio, with the death of it. And it doesn't. It just stands the test of time because it's a great medium.
Yeah, it's the adaptability, as you say, isn't it?
And digital liberates radio in a way that it was more challenging for things like print, etc.
Yeah, and hopefully that's what this report's obviously there to do, is to talk about how you can combine those channels for a sort of bigger cumulative effect. Obviously, look, in terms of overall investments, obviously there's a lot of advertisers already investing a lot of their budget in audio. We heard from Arafa this morning. We're going to hear from Greg's about their sort of campaigns as well. But once they've run a campaign, and I guess during the campaign, I'm interested to know a little bit more about effectiveness and how you measure campaigns as they go along. And I guess how that's changed. You must have more data than you've ever had before, which gives you a lot of benefits. But are there kind of limitations to that and issues with that? Maybe I can start with you, Jon.
So look, first thing is a shout out to you guys at the Radio Centre, because we're huge fans of Radio Centre research, particularly the Radio Gauge study. Having more data is both a blessing and a curse, right? And particularly when you talk about kind of in the digital sphere, the fact that you can measure everything means that people do, and it creates a degree of short-termism. So I think kind of everything digital tends to be measured versus its short-term impact, which is great, because you need to do that. You need to be able to talk about the immediate impact of things and to demonstrate that things are working. But it's really important, to your point about long and short of it, right? It's quite an old piece of work now, but it's still hugely relevant, because what we need to do is find that balance. So for us, it's about having a really balanced measurement framework, which includes short, medium, and long-term metrics. We typically try and push clients towards a rounded kind of MMM solution. It's not right in all cases, but in any case, it's about making sure we're just balancing long and short-term metrics.
Yeah. And Kate, is that the same similar approach? Or?
Yeah, very similar. We kind of measure the effectiveness of radio in a similar way that we would measure effectiveness of other channels, MMA being often the preferred choice. But then, for clients where that's not an option for them, there are brand or sales uplift studies that we can work alongside our partners or our own research team with, or A/B testing, or so there's lots of different solutions, and it really isn't that different to lots of other channels that we try and measure.
Yeah. Gemma, I mean, obviously, radio is sometimes challenged in terms of the attribution that it gets. Again, Rafa was quite funny this morning saying that, Google would claim every sort of impact, wouldn't it? Because it's that last click, it's that last bit. But the attribution of radio, some of our research shows, it's not necessarily that first 20 minutes after the impact. It could be any time in the next couple of days or beyond. So do you find that a sort of challenge to have that sort of conversation with clients sometimes about how radio works in practice? Yeah,
and it's quite a difficult one because, as marketeers, and like Jon said, we're very much, because everything's on demand and you want it now. I think like clients want results and they want to know what's happening and what it's delivering, because they're spending a lot of money in it and they've got targets to hit in their businesses. And I think if you take a step back from and look at how radio and audio is consumed, it's consumed completely differently to TV and digital. It's not kind of now, and you look at how long people are listening. It is a medium that builds reach and frequency. It's a frequency medium. So I think we sometimes fall in the trap of wanting to know what it's delivered immediately, and it's not possible, especially with linear radio. I think digital audios, there's more you can do with that because of the nature of it, because you can get a click, you can get this, and you can track people with their mobile phones and whatever else it is that they track them with into a shop. And it's great for clients, but I think we sometimes, again, we'll go, that's down to digital audio, and you forget that actually if you've got a multimedia campaign, it's not just that, it's everything all together. And I think that we probably need to stop trying to push it as much, which is a bit of a roundabout turn that I've done, because this time last year I was like, oh, we need more measurement, we need to prove it works. But it does work, because we know it works, because people spending it, people see return on investment from it, econometrics show it works. It's just you have to wait to get that, you have to wait to get that kind of, I can't think of the word, what is it?
The effect.
Yeah, the effect.
Yeah, yeah.
Think of it then, I was like, oh,
Yeah. And Simon, in terms of Bauer's approach to, supporting, your agencies or supporting the clients in terms of measuring effectiveness, I mean, again, presumably it's a mixture of different approaches depending on the nature of the campaign and the platform that you're using.
Yeah, so I agree with everything that's been said, really. I think the Radio Centre done some brilliant work to show the effectiveness. We do huge amounts of case studies to show effectiveness. We've got, we work with a company called Veritone to actually demonstrate attribution, although I feel a bit conflicted about that because that pulls you down into the platform's game and it's difficult to win. We've also got IPA effectiveness research that we've done. So we've got lots. And I think the interesting thing is, if you look at any other medium, when they do effectiveness research, radio always comes out in the top 2 as well.
Yeah.
There's no question radio works.
Yeah.
Thank you, Thinkbox.
Yeah. The question is, how do we get more clients to spend on it?
Yeah.
That to me is the question.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think, that's another question I'd like to ask you all, I think, really. Obviously, we have this mountain of effectiveness evidence that we, like to say we've got more publicly available evidence than anybody else. We know from the IPA touchpoints data that we account for a big chunk of people's time with media, 20% or so. But despite all of that, we're still a 5% medium. So there's not necessarily arguing that investment would necessarily directly follow audience in that way. But how do we close the gap? What can we do to try and address that and do a bit more? Maybe, Gemma, if I start with you.
I think it's quite a difficult one, because you're comparing kind of, like if you're looking at TV and radio, you're comparing completely stark different kind of cost per thousands that you're dealing with. So automatically TV is going to take a bigger piece of the kind of the pie because it's just a more expensive medium. Both are kind of mass reach. I think from my side, it's about creating deeper, better partnerships with stations. I'm a big fan of doing more partnership work and really tapping into that relationship that the station has with a listener. I think partnerships is really underplayed, not just a sponsorship, I mean a deeper partnership. You've seen we've got some really good ones. Greg's going to talk about the one that they did with Global. I've seen some really good ones for Jet2 that Kate's team have done. Like Gemma from Jon's team has done some amazing partnership work. I think it's incredibly important. So for me, it's about pushing more into that space, because there's only a limited amount of inventory. And already we've gone from being able to book radio a week out, getting a really strong schedule, to now having to book a kind of 6 to 8 weeks in advance to get a really decent, strong schedule. So I think it's just pushing the boundaries on partnerships and what that looks like. More radio groups coming together to work on partnerships, I know it's kind of a big thing in the room where people are like, ooh, Global versus Bauer, but it's such a big, imagine if like all the media owners got behind what Simon presented, if all the radio owners got behind that kind of, mental health thing, it would be massive.
Yeah, and it can be done. Obviously Global and Bauer are both the big shareholders of Radio Centre and drive the agenda for the industry. But I see what you mean in terms of what other initiatives could we do together to try and punch through using the evidence that we've got. And Kate, in terms of what else we might be able to do to sort of close the gap, are there things about the sort of unique value of audio that we can be doing more about to sort of help assist that?
I think there's a couple of things. One of them builds on what Gemma was saying. I think it is about the kind of creating engaging content. So often radio is listened to while you're driving, while you're doing the ironing. It's something that's on in the background. It's a little bit passive, and I think that often means that people aren't actively talking about the content that they've heard on radio, which is very different from how people consume podcasts and the kind of conversation that has there. So very rarely do people come in and talk about, in our office, what they've heard on Capital Breakfast Show, but they'll have a heated debate about the rest is entertainment and what's cool and who's cool, that they listened to the week before. So how can we make some of that content a little bit more engaging so people are talking about it? And there's something, picking up on what I said earlier, about engage a little bit of passion in our media teams and the younger kind of media planners in our teams, and getting them engaged and passionate with audio, because they will. We often say that people who work in media aren't real people. They listen to primarily podcasts, so their default is podcasts. And actually, while it's a bigger share than you might think overall, they'd be surprised at how small it is, because they think that 15 to 24-year-olds only listen to podcasts, they don't listen to radio. And then a second kind of potentially more short-term thing is HFSS. If I worked in audio, I'd be going after all of those clients that potentially aren't going to be able to do what they want to do on TV in the short to mid-term. At the moment, that's not something that is an issue that you have. So I'd be focusing there in the short term.
Definitely a short-term opportunity, but I guess from our perspective on the sort of lobbying side as well, what we would want to avoid is suddenly our top 20 advertisers all being HFSS advertisers, and then the government looking very closely and reconsidering what they might do in terms of those and other restrictions. So it's a really tricky balance.
The recent guidelines that have come out, there's potential that some brands who have invested really heavily in changing their products to be HFSS compliant will still be subject to the same restrictions. So it doesn't necessarily mean that you'll be top to toe in pizza and Coke. There could be a lot of advertising.
They're all very welcome.
And I agree, because I think it's 68% of all listening is done between 5:30am and 9pm for commercial radio. So again, it's such a big opportunity that I think it doesn't have to be. We don't have to push it so that it's just, eat a burger and eat these sweets. It's about how you do it with those clients that have really tried to kind of do something different, and clients that offer a healthy alternative as well. It's not all about, you can't even run a brand ad if it's because the connotations are that, for Greggs in particular, if we run a brand ad, the connotations might be, you're just trying to push the unhealthy, but they offer a range of healthy foods as well. So it's a case of you feel like sometimes you can't win.
Yeah,
gosh, I mean that's actually more eloquent than I am, isn't she?
Sorry, but that's
said no one ever. About me.
But actually, that reformulation of products actually like to be a bigger effect than the advertising ban. Actually, is the truth. So that's probably encouraging, and there's an opportunity there as well. Jon, just in terms of that opportunity really, and closing the gap, is there anything else additional?
It's probably summarising what the guys have said, really. I think, yes, there probably is a short-term opportunity in less healthy foods, but I think if you bring it back to the broader principles, going back to the previous question about measurement, the key word for me, and the thing we talk to our clients about all the time, is incrementality. Right. Collectively, as an industry, proving the incremental effects of investment in audio is how you unlock the budgets, because we typically think that our marketing clients, the CMO is the client. They've got to sell our plans into their own budget holders, which is CFOs and CEOs. So there's a huge piece around talking the language of the boardroom and couching it in terms of language that CFOs will understand. And incrementality is a huge part of that. I'd also hugely agree with what Kate said in terms of it's a constant battle that I know you guys are fighting, which is keeping on with the message around addressing the misconceptions or preconceptions about what audio is and who it's for and who's consuming it. I think that you're just going to have to keep fighting that battle, because as Kate said, that there probably is a real disconnect between people who plan and buy audio and the people who actually consume it.
Yeah, as I said earlier, I mean, we see that, in our interaction with particularly graduates and new people entering agencies, and their initial perception based on their individual behaviour is that it's much smaller, or it's not listened to by younger audiences. But so you've got a challenge with the data, but you've got to do more than that, I think is what you're saying. Yeah,
exactly.
So we've got a couple of questions, a question from the audience, just got time for that. So Jenny asks, going back to Simon's earlier presentation, will agencies continue to increase social spend for clients, or is there any signs of that slowing down? I mean, it's going to be a bit of a theme for today, I think, based on Simon's comments earlier. But
as we asked on my session, with Unilever's rise from 30 to 50%, there doesn't seem to be any sign of it. And I think that, go to the previous question, and what I spoke, even if you don't look at the mental health challenges around social media, they still have a bit of a grip on the industry around spend. And I think agencies and clients need to do more around that. I genuinely think they do. They need to be more challenging. And I think one of the points was made about Bauer and Global working more closely together to provide a concerted effort to challenge that. And I think you've seen, the reality is both of our businesses have got new leadership. Mm-hmm. And I kind of feel there's an opportunity for us to work more closely to provide, really compelling reasons why audio is the right place to put that money rather than keep ploughing it into social.
Any of you guys want to address that question as well?
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. It's about continuing to challenge. I think one of the stats that you had up was the number of, I think it was a quote from Omar that said, the number of CMOs he's spoken to that don't let their kids on social but are happy to spend their money. And that is a challenge that we have a lot when we're talking to brands. We're talking to our CMO and they talk to their CFO, and their kids, well, they spend all their time in social. So that's where we need to, that's where we need to reach younger audiences. They don't listen to radio. They certainly don't watch telly anymore. So it's about it goes back to those preconceptions that Jon talked about. And I think it's just about making sure that we're having those challenging conversations with clients. And if we are investing in social, we're doing it actively for a specific reason. We're not just what you said, sleepwalking into spending more and more. Yes, social arguably has a role, but making sure that we are doing all of the right sense checks and the right kind of smart planning in the background to make sure that we're making the right decisions and not just being swept up in the latest TikTok trend or because that's where clients think that they want to spend their money. So it's about us working with our clients much more closely and our media partners much more closely to make sure we're having the right challenging questions. Yeah.
I think it's also quite, sometimes I think some media owners kind of forget that as an agency, you get briefed and you put forward your best recommendation and what you would recommend. And then quite often you can get pushback on that from clients because their kids spend time on social media or they want to be in this and they want to be in that, or someone's reached out from a certain media owner so they want to be a part of that. So you can do and recommend and push back. And I know at Carat we do a lot of kind of guiding and trying to kind of look at the different options and alternatives to give that overall reach piece. So I think that from that point of view, we do push back, we do challenge clients in terms of what's right, but ultimately, if a client, wants that budget somewhere because they think it's the best thing for that budget, they're the ones signing it off. So you've only got a finite amount of kind of pushing back without saying, no, we're not going to spend there when they want to.
Yeah. Okay, unfortunately, I think our time's up. I'm going to have to draw this to a close, but if I can just ask you to show your appreciation once again to Simon, Gemma, Kate, and Jon.